So what is the best humidifier? It doesn't really come down so much to preference, but more so what is safe and healthy. These are the two main types. You have the evaporative type and the ultrasonic. The ultrasonic is much more common and popular, but I'm actually going to show how it is the one that you should not get. There's also a vaporizer type, which is similar in terms of this when it comes to how safe it is. The Consumer Reports, they did a study in which they tested dozens of different humidifiers of all three of those types. And what they found was that this and the vaporizer, both of those emitted a lot of bacteria into the air, whereas the evaporative models, none of those models emitted any bacteria. So these are definitely safer. They're not as cool because this one's running and this one's running, and you get to see like the cool particles, but just remember that there's bacteria, parasites, like there's all kinds of stuff is in this mist, and I can actually smell it right now. It's like a musty, mildewy smell. So I'm going to turn that off because I don't want to endure that. But these take a lot of upkeep if you want to keep yourself safe. You need to let them dry out. You need to wash them once a week. There's so much upkeep with these. Whereas with the evaporative model, you don't have to do that. You just need to make sure that it dries out in between uses. And so with these, you do need to use distilled water to make sure that you minimize the amount of bacterial growth and everything, all of the minerals that can be in there. People talk about like there being a white dust that sits over their furniture with these. That's because they're not using distilled water. With the evaporative, you don't need to do that because it only evaporates the water into the air. And so with that, it makes it a whole lot easier. So I can actually take this out, take it to my sink and fill it up there. Whereas with this, I need to keep on getting gallons of distilled water. Now, in terms of price, they really do equal out or equalize because with this one, it uses a wick that kind of soaks up the water and then the fan blows it out. So the wick you need to replace about once every 2 months or so. Whereas with this one, it does not use a wick. And so you need to use distilled water. So throughout this video, we'll go into why a humidifier is so important. We'll go into the various tools that you need, such as a hygrometer, and we'll figure out which one is the best for you. Now, I almost chose this one because it comes with a little light inside of it, and an ultraviolet light that supposedly kills bacteria. There is evidence to show that ultraviolet light does kill bacteria. The problem is it only has one light and there's a pillar in between, so bacteria is definitely going to grow inside there. The light doesn't cover the entire thing. And so this one was the one I was going to go with until I did a bit more research and found out that evaporative models were much safer. So whenever I first got into evaporative models, this one was my initial purchase. This is the Evap 40. And the reason I got this was because it has these really neat jugs. This thing holds 4 gallons. So I figured, well, if we hold 4 gallons, then, well, that'll mean that I'll have to fill it up much less often. The only issue with that is I eventually realized the best way to keep an evaporative humidifier clean is to make sure that it dries out in between. And so now with that in mind, the 4 gallon is a bit overkill for me. If you were trying to just take care of your whole house, put it in the living room and let it do the whole house, then this one is probably perfect. And so with that in mind, I really enjoy this one because you just take it to the sink, fill it up with water, and then boom, it goes in so easy, and then it starts to glug, 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 and give you a little taste inside. And then it fills up down here. It's got 2 wicks, and it just has the fan right here, and it just flows out. And then every once in a while, you'll hear a little bit of a glug, glug, glug sound whenever the water comes from the jug down into the little bin. That's it. It's got a nice deep Vornado fan sound. So it's actually a good white noise whenever you're going to sleep. So yeah, I've had this one in my room for a couple weeks now. I really like it. But the reason why I decided to go with this one recently is because it's smaller. You know, this one takes up a lot of real estate. And so I wanted to try this one out because, well, this one, even though it is smaller and it actually sits in a really nice place in my room, unfortunately it annoys the heck out of me. For one, it's not a top fill, so you have to turn it over, you have to twist this thing off and fill it up from there. Now, granted, you don't have to use distilled water, so that makes things a little bit easier, but if I can have it a little easier and also not have to do the top fill, why not do that? And it also has a really annoying sound to where every 3 to 5 minutes it kind of starts like it's revving. Yeah, like that. And so it's just, I can't do this one. This one is definitely a return. And so here we are with the Honeywell, and I like it so far. It seems like the perfect humidifier. It doesn't take up too much real estate, and it looks slick. It seems sturdy enough. Like I really enjoy it, and the fact that you can both fill it up here and take this out and fill it up in the water, I really like that, because this one you have to take it out and fill it up, whereas this one is much more versatile and it doesn't annoy me. It's just got a nice steady hum, and it stays like that for perpetuity. I think that's the word. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the one I'm going to go with. I'm going to try it out for a couple weeks just to make sure, because the only issue that could happen is the wick is back here. It's kind of sequestered to where I don't know if mold is still going to grow there even though I'm letting it dry out. So we'll see, we'll double check to make sure that it actually does dry out in between uses. And if it does, then this is definitely the one that I'm going to recommend. And we're back. Not 2 weeks, but just 3 days later, because it's already painfully obvious that this one just is not going to work out. It's painful because it was so perfect, except for a couple unfortunate things. For one, it has an automatic shutoff whenever it gets, whenever the water goes pretty much all the way down. So there is a little bit of water left in here, just enough to create like a little bit of algae growth in there. And I mean, that's not super concerning, but the main thing is, as I feared, in the back, this guy, it's been off for like 2 days and it's still a little bit moist back here. So whenever it's on, the air comes through here and up and out. And so if it were to actually stay on, even when the water is pretty much empty, then it would allow it to dry out completely, but it doesn't. And so with that, it's not going to dry out completely every day in between uses. With this one, it stays on the entire time. Whenever I wake up in the morning, there's typically just like a little puddle left in here. And that's only because I've gotten really good at judging how much I need. But the main thing is, this will keep running until both of the wicks dry out and that puddle also dries up. So this is definitely the safest bet. I can leave it running until it's all the way dry, then I can turn it off, or I can just leave it running all day, and that's fine. I'd rather use electricity than risk my health with mold and fungus growth. And that Consumer Report study did say that the evaporative model doesn't spew bacteria out into the air, but I mean, just using my basic common sense, if there is mold or fungus growing on the wicks, then some of that is going to get blown. I mean, that's how fungus and mold propagate. They let their spores out into the air and let the wind carry them to their next germination stage. I'm not sure, but it seems obvious that that's going to happen if there is some kind of growth inside. So it won't spew things into the air as much as an ultrasonic would, but I think it would be a false sense of security to think that it's not going to spew anything into the air whatsoever. Granted, the air outside has stuff in it, so we should expect there to be some stuff, but we want to minimize it as much as possible. And the way to do that is to let this thing air dry. So this is the one out of 10 different humidifiers I've gone through over this past year. This one meets all the requirements. If you want to learn more about it, there's going to be a separate video just dedicated to this one here soon. And I'll be buying a couple more to put in other rooms because it's the perfect thing and I don't have to worry about it. So with that said, I encourage you to watch the rest of this video. There are more tidbits to learn along the way. One in particular, if you don't do it correctly, you can destroy your house. So in the wintertime, it's particularly pertinent that you know the limits of what a humidifier is capable of doing. And as always, there will be links in the description for every single model here. I would recommend pairing it with some kind of air purifier just to be safe. And I really enjoy this model because it has ultraviolet setting, and you know that it's on whenever that blue light is on. And so the ultraviolet helps to control virus proliferation. And since COVID is going around, that's the perfect thing that we really want to focus on. So these are two essential items to have in your bedroom that, you know, people typically don't have. Like, everybody knows that you need a light bulb so that you can see, but you really need a humidifier and an air purifier so that you can breathe. And to really drive this lesson home as to the ultrasonic dangers, whenever you're cleaning it, make sure that you don't use chemicals, because when you use chemicals, whatever remaining residue is in there is just going to be shot out into the air and can cause chronic lung disease. So make sure that you just use distilled white vinegar, something similar, something very organic that's not going to cause harm. You submerge all of the working parts for 20 minutes. After that, scrub all the cracks and everything with a toothbrush to try to get rid of the scale, and then you can disinfect it as well. So that, again, that's a lot of work that I do not feel like putting into my humidifier. And if you see that white dust that I was talking about earlier, make sure that you stop using your humidifier right away, because that's white, that's like little rock dust. That's the minerals that's in your sink. It's okay if it's in your water to wash your hands, but it's not okay to breathe. That can be very toxic for your lungs. And I also read in an article, it said that the best way to stay safe is to never use a humidifier within a closed room, to always open up your rooms. I think that is horrible advice, because the reason why you're trying to humidify your room is to humidify your room. Once you open the door, then that makes it to where all the humidity just flows out. I mean, you're trying to basically keep a cloud in your room, and a cloud is just going to dissipate whenever you open up a door. So that's, I mean, yes, it makes things safer, but it destroys the point of even getting the humidifier in the first place. And so that's why the evaporative model is definitely the way to go, because you can have it in your closed room without worrying about bacteria being spewed out. Well, according to the American Society of Heating and Refrigeration, you need to have a relative humidity of between 30% and 50%. What that means is if you can stay within that sweet spot, then that means that you're going to get sick less often and you're going to get higher quality sleep. And this is due to the fact that if you get above 50%, then you're going to start to have like mildew, more bacteria and everything will grow. If you get below 30%, more viruses, your nasal passages start to dry up. You get much less ideal sleep if everything within you is just so much drier. And according to the ASHRAE standards, it's they actually indicate 40 to 60%. So I mean, it's not necessarily a perfect science. There tends to be some conflict between different standard issuers. But anyways, ASHRAE is ASHRAE, if you want to look that one up. But yeah, it's somewhere in between 30 and 60%, something like that. Definitely not 5%, where your buildings, the materials start to crack and deteriorate, and definitely not 100%. Oh, and a bit more on the less than 30% is if you don't have enough humidity, then the static electricity rises. Sinus infections tend to occur more often, and most importantly is respiratory illness, and colds tend to increase. And considering we're in the middle of a pandemic that has to deal with respiratory illness, why the hell haven't we heard more about humidifiers? The first litmus test would be, do your lips get chapped often? Do you have less quality sleep? Do you wake up with nosebleeds? Do you wake up in the morning with really dry nose or mouth? Those are obvious signals, but I mean, if you're like my mom, you've just grown accustomed to it, and you're not really aware of just what kind of environment you're in. So in order to be objective about it, if you can get one of these, this particular one is the Mengshen digital psychrometer. Yeah, psychrometer. I don't know how to say it. But yeah, it's a nifty little device to where it actually measures what the humidity level is in your room.
All right, so here we are booted up and going pretty well for in here. It's at 41%, as you can see. That's not bad. So let's keep going. Here in the kitchen, we got almost 42. It's pretty ideal. And the reason for that is because in the last couple days it's been raining outside, and I've had my windows open, so the wind has been blowing, and it's been naturally humidifying my whole house. And so yeah, it saves a little bit of electricity and water. I don't have to worry about using the humidifiers when I do that natural technique.
Now, if you're anything like me, you're going to be super skeptical, and you're not going to take the word of just one device. So I've got 3 more devices. These 2 are the exact same, and this one is the Therma Pro. So whenever I checked it, I found that this one, back a couple weeks ago, I found that this one was at like 32, and this one was at 35. So, I mean, it wasn't horrible. It's not precise. Don't expect these to be industrial, commercial, precision tools. But as far as a ballpark range goes, like even these 2 right now, one's 43 and one's 44. They're the exact same thing. I turned them on like a minute apart from each other. Actually, one's 45 and one's 43. It changes. But all of them seem to have a pretty reasonable consensus. 46, 44, 43.6, 45. So whatever it is, I don't know, but it's good enough. If you need to be precise, there is something you can do called the salt test. You can use different compounds, but salt is just the easiest, most readily available one, where you put salt in a little container, make sure it's sealed with your meter, and then it creates a relative humidity of 75%. And so as long as you do that correct, and then this reads 75%, then that means that it's at a good level, and then you could potentially adjust this to match with this one.
One last and absolutely pertinent information about owning a humidifier is, as you can see here, whenever it gets colder outside, you need to make sure not to turn the humidifier too high up. If you do that, then you can start to cause condensation to occur. It's similar to whenever you have a glass of water to where it has ice in it. You'll feel there be droplets of water on the outside of the glass. The same thing will happen with your house if it's too cold outside and it's too wet indoors. So make sure that you kind of keep this in mind. If you go to stressorprofessor.com, you can download this from the humidifier article, or just take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. It's pretty basic information,
but if you don't follow it, you can ruin your house.